Father Kieran Birmingham is an Irish St. Patrick's missionary who worked in Kenya, South Africa, Ireland, and was the one-time Superior General of the Society. In the year 2023, we marked 30 years since the process of discernment for internationalization of the membership of the Society began. Father Kieran recalls this process. But to begin with, I asked him about his early days growing up in Ireland.
I think for starters, anyway, I grew up in the very middle of the country, a place called County Offaly. And we'll say a very rural area. I grew up on a farm, and my father and mother were both from farming backgrounds. I mean, small farms though, and mixed farming of, all sorts of vegetables, animals, sort of things like that, hens, chickens, pigs, all sort of things around. So very much a farming place anyway. So I'm the eldest in the family, and I was the firstborn, and then there were four others then born. As each one came along, of course, the neighbours used to be telling my mother, the next one will be a girl, the next one will be a girl, but it was always boys anyway. So the five of us, I think they must have decided to stop after five anyway. So that was the way it was. So then, I suppose, life was simple, and we started, of course, Offaly or Ireland at that time, of course, was very much like I was going to say it was almost like a seminary, the sense that everybody went to mass, went to church, they prayed every day. This sort of thing. You said morning prayers, you blessed yourself with holy water going out to school or going somewhere. And then in the evening time, you may have said, well, sometimes, not every time, but we said the rosary quite often as well together. But you wouldn't dare miss mass or anything like that. And your parents would catch you if you did, and certainly the parish priest would too, So it was very much very religious in that sense now, And growing up, then we went to the local primary school, which was about a couple of kilometres away from us. Walked to school, of course, and the school is a small school, 70 or 80 children going to the school, that type of thing. And bit by bit, I suppose we went through the years, it was what do you call it though? I suppose there was nothing very. There was a lot of, even as children, we did a lot of little bits of work and all of that. We were getting into the life on the farm, from an early enough age, And so I suppose then when I got to about 11 or 12, then I went to secondary school to the version of the Christian Brothers, the Presentation Brothers, and that was I had to go on a bus about 10 miles away, and then the brothers were quite strict but demanding, and so on like that. And there, I suppose, for the first time then, we met a whole lot of other students from other schools and other places, So it was good, of course. Every month, of course, the brothers insisted we went to confession as a class. The religious aspect was always emphasized anyway. And of course, prayer at the beginning of class and, that type of thing, So life went along like that. I suppose interesting in our parish was that there was four families fairly near us where a member of the family had become a priest. They were all Carmelites. The OCDs now, those Carmelites. And the thing was then one of them especially was very friendly with my father. He used to come whenever he came home from the Philippines. He would come and tell us about life in the missions in the Philippines and so on. So it was very interesting like that anyway. And maybe that's where my first thoughts about missions began to start.
Kieran now turns his attention to the origins of the discernment of internationalization in the Society's membership.
We used to get the Africa magazine as well, it was sold in our parish church. You were expected, I suppose families were expected or asked to buy a copy anyway. And then, so we were reading the stories there about the missions, about St. Patrick's and so on. And life was simple enough. I never went anywhere very much from home, except now and again family would organize a car. We didn't have a car ourselves growing up, and so we would get an outing to Knock, which was the Marian Shrine. So that would happen one day a year as well. So I suppose that was maybe a special outing anyway, Then we had an aunt then was a sister of charity. So her and a cousin as well, a sister of charity. So they used to come once a year to visit us as well. So there was a certain sense of religious life was always around in the air in a sense, like that. And so life went on simple enough like that. I mean, we didn't get television early on, I'd say, but we used to watch television in other places, in other houses, like to look at games and so on like that. But I think that early on then, my brother Joe, who was next to me, he tells a story like this, that when the Carmelites came, because they used to expect when somebody was finishing primary school, they would come around and say, is your son ready now to come to our secondary school, our post-primary school, and prepare then maybe he might have a vocation at the Carmelites. So the way Joe would tell the story, when they came round, my mother was there and I was missing. So my mother said, oh, no, there's no way Kieran is going to go near the Carmelites. He's going to go to the Brothers in Bar, to the school. But he said, well, of course, when they came around, it was his turn. She said immediately, oh, no, bring him off to the Carmelites, that sort of way. So it was he would see it like that as a little bit, how did my mother get rid of him so quick? But anyway, but after I suppose it must be 17 years of age when the vocations man from Kiltegan, Liam McSorley, came and said, what about coming and joining us now for this missionary work? We can't let the Muslims, they said, take over all of Africa. There's all these different Muslim groups coming now. Come on, you must do your part in this. So I suppose I got interested. At the same time, the Jesuits were also offering something. We used to go for a school retreat to a Jesuit retreat house. And again, I remember getting a letter from the Jesuit vocations man saying, very soon now you will be applying to become a Jesuit. But anyway, it happened anyway that in the end, the one I went to was Kiltegan, and they invited us to come to see the place. But before I went, I told my mother, and of course she was very upset, and then said she told the parish priest who came and interviewed me and said, "Are you sure you want to go to that place? And you can join the diocese, and you can be a volunteer missionary for a few years, so on like that. But we want you around home." But I said, no, I want to I want to look at this. I want to think about the missionary life. And then she asked my father. He was involved as well, but he just said, "Oh, sure, whatever he wants to do, let him do it." That sort of way. So that's the way it went. And off went to Kiltegan for my first visit. That was my first time away from home. Then we'd say going through Dublin. I suppose 1967. That's around Easter of that time. And then I liked the place, liked them, the students, the Kiltegan students I met there, and then we'd say decided, yes, I'll go back. I'll go to Kiltegan, So that's the way it was. So September 67, then we went into Kiltegan. There was 33 other students there 33 was in the class. We used to get the numbers that time. You were 1, 2, 3. I think it went according to age. There was some late vocations who got the highest numbers, I suppose. So I think I was down around 30 or 31 anyway in the class. But that didn't mean a lot because then the teachers were very good. And we had some very good people at the time. Paddy Hagan, who was very steeped in liturgy, and he was opening up the post. It was just after the Vatican Council. So we were getting a lot of new stuff from him about liturgy and Mass and what the different sacraments meant. So it was very exciting anyway. And then we had a new man home from Rome who was studying scripture. That was Dermot Connolly. And of course he was again opening up the books to us and so on. It was lovely. And another great teacher we had was John P. Carroll, who was very good at Irish, I suppose short stories, Irish literature. All literature, but he was good at, I liked some of the short stories of all, and he used to try to get us to write bits of stories as well, to get our imagination going. So the first year was very nice. We were shocked near the end around Easter when one student decided suddenly to leave, and we couldn't believe this anyway. But then that was the start then of things. We had the 30 days retreat during it. I think that time it was broken up for the first time to 20 days first in October, and then 10 days around Easter. So it was, I suppose, it was made a bit easier for us. So then, after our first year at home, we were allowed to go to university then. And I did 3 years doing an arts degree. And during that time then met a lot of new students, of course, again. And it was a good mix of boys and girls, around. So it was nice. It was a nice time to be. And then after the 3 years then back to Kiltegan to theology. And again, now we had the usual teachers, Dermot Connolly and so on. But also then we had Vincent McNamara and Donald Dorr. They were both very, very good teachers, you know what I mean? And we learned a lot, and I found it very exciting. And there was a lot of course, had the usual program of games and prayers and all sorts of things as well, but But it was a very nice time. I suppose it was around that sort of 70 students maybe at the beginning of the time, but that number began to decline a bit quickly too as the years went by. But by the time I finished, I can't remember now how many would be in the seminary. But I got appointed then to Rome, and I was sent there to do moral theology for 2 years. So that was a new experience, of course, living with some of our older men as priests, of course, and then going out to study. And that's the first time then meeting a lot of African students as well, like from Nigeria and everywhere as well, like, so it was a good time in that sense. And then coming near the end of the time, then Peter O'Reilly, our Superior General, passed through Rome and said I was going to Turkana. So that was fine. And but he said, we'll probably take you back to Kiltegan after a while. So I went off then to Turkana. Of course, that was a real eye opener. Of course, my first time out on the missionary thing. I remember on the way from Kitale up to Lodwar, we had a puncture, and then Johnny Mahan, the bishop, changed the wheel without any bother, and then after another while we got another puncture. And here was the problem now. We had to mend a puncture on the side of the road, and there we were jumping on the tire to try and brake to release the hubcap, whatever you call it, the hub of the wheel. But as we were jumping up and down on the tire, some of the Turkana women who were looking on there laughed and laughed and laughed. Of course, I didn't realize at the time we were doing the men's dance, this jumping up and down, So anyway, we arrived in Lodwar and settled in, and then a few days later, then we were pushed on to Loarignac, where Jerry O'Carroll held us then for. It was Niall Martin, and there was a few more guys and a few MMMs. We learned a bit of Turkana then for 5 or 6. Well, no, about 3 months worth, I think. And then I think Jerry insisted we had to give a homily in Turkana after about 3 weeks anyway. So it was a fairly pathetic homily, but sure, anyway, we did something. And then I suppose during that time, of course, I began to see as well the struggle that people were going through and the difficulties. But it was amazing the things the church was doing, like for the schools, for education. Schools are being built everywhere, clinics, whatnot, and there was a lot of lay volunteers as well, teaching skills, carpentry and so on to the young people as well in Turkana. So it was a very active time, and I remember getting my first letter from home from a local teacher, and she had got all the kids in the primary school to write a little note to me, and of course I was full of tears after reading it, because the children were writing things like, saw your mother yesterday on her bicycle going to town, saw your brother here, whatever, But anyway, it was a very memorable thing anyway. And then I suppose the couple of years passed very quick anyway, in a way. And then the next thing was I got word saying, yes, I must return to Kiltegan. So I came back to Kiltegan, and straight away I was doing some moral theology. But I think after a while they began to realize I was no academic, that I was somehow a very ordinary sort of guy, and I suppose coming after the footsteps of Vincent McNamara, who was a bit busy somewhere else at the time anyway. After a while they said, well, would you teach church history? So that's what I was doing, I suppose. But then after a year, just after 1 year, then I became the dean of students. So that was a fairly busy time then, and that was a fairly anxious time as well, So, but anyway, I began to learn a whole lot of stuff about myself, because I had to deal with students, and there was a lot of challenges. There was conflicts, whatever like that. You'd be looking after the student car and getting students here and there, arranging pastoral work, all sorts of things like that. So after a while I began, there's an aspect of me that I suppose was there all along, was that sense of worry, of anxiety, so on like that. But a good thing happened then was that around that time that these I suppose it's a version of the Rulla teaching of psychology in Rome, they began to offer courses for formators, So around 1982, then I started a 3-year program then, of studying, whatever, counselling, so on like that. So I found a lot of help in that, over the years. And then I suppose it was a good time really. There was a lot of activity around Kiltegan, a lot of news about the missions. It used to be lovely as well to meet the bishops from Africa. Of course, we used to like Bishop Yosanga coming. He was full of laughs, always had plenty of stories to tell. There was a good contact there, I suppose, and a good sense of relationship, with the bishops, in Africa anyway. And things were going on like that. Then I was appointed in charge of the spiritual year, like in 1985. Like, so, I mean, that was my job then, along with Martin O'Connor, and we were working away with the students. But of course, numbers were beginning to go down, and also numbers were going down in theology. So we were, I think one year you'd have 7 or 8 students, which was suddenly a huge drop from where we were previously, like, you know. And that thing struck me all right, that there's a lot of work to be done. We're very busy everywhere, but we're having fewer people like to coming forward to do the work, like, you know. And then I suppose that time, then maybe that's getting on then to the international thing in some ways, because maybe coming into the 80s, I mean, through the 80s, then another article began to appear in Ad Invicem, like about internationalization, or sorry, about the need to have African members, that there's a lot of good diocesan priests now, but why can't we have some of these ourselves, like, you know, as members of the society? And of course, that was going on at a fair rate. Then there were people, of course, I knew that a lot of members as well out on the mission areas were very busy, but they often were overworked or needed to, who was going to take up their work if they got sick or retired and so on. So I think people began to see there was a need for to expand in some ways, but maybe there was more than that as well, like that somehow like the world was changing and we needed to be a bit broader in our vision and so on. And coming up to that chapter of 1990, like there was a flurry then of articles. It'd be interesting to research that in the Ad Invicem, quite a lot of pros and cons, some for, some against. But I mean, like I remember, I forget who was said or where it was that was written now or spoken. I don't know. It was saying this wouldn't suit us. We're starting too late with the idea of being international. It'd be like a very old man marrying a very young girl. Like this thing will not work out, or it'll be very difficult. And I mean, others saying, well, I suppose some of them might be practical way. You have no idea what a young African priest would be facing at the moment. Like he'd be responsible for, in many ways, to his family, and how can he be abroad and away from them, and who will, you know, that he will be in an impossible position. You'd have all sorts of things like that. But on the other hand, then people are saying, well, we know the young African priests, they're very good at relating to people and so on. So there was a lot of to's and fro's like that. But
a chapter is like a general assembly in a congregation that decides the vision and mission for the next couple of years and elects new leadership. Father Kieran recalls the chapter of 1990 that brought him into the leadership of the society.
Coming into the chapter, I suppose, then suddenly I was elected one of maybe about 5 delegates from the Irish region, maybe. I mean, I can't remember now how many exactly, but it was a bit of a surprise. I mean, in a way, I wasn't expecting it. And then at the chapter, the chapter retreat was led by Brian Grogan. He was a Jesuit, and his big theme, I suppose, around discernment. And he knew, of course, the chapter was about electing people and all of that. There was a big changeover. Peter Finnegan had finished 2 terms, so he wasn't going forward. So there was need for a new beginning now, I suppose, in a way. And then I suppose during the during the retreat anyway, he began to say, of course, you know, he was giving his input. You must start talking now to one another as well about who you think would be suitable people for the key jobs, if you like. And he called it this word. He had this Latin word, murmuratio, like murmuring, like, you know, that you would walk with somebody around the walks and you might say such a guy was a good guy or such a guy might or might not be suitable. So I suppose we'd have these sort of chats as we went around through that. I suppose the retreat was about 5 or 6 days anyway. A few people came to me and said, you know, that I would be in the running, and then I was not sure how I felt about it. And then 1 or 2 then came to me and said, look, we hear people are recommending you now, but it won't suit you because you're an anxious person. You're worried about things. So it'd be better not to do that. We advise you like not to take the main job anyway. I mean, not to go for that, but you could help in some other role anyway. But then on the other hand, there was someone coming and saying to me, no, don't worry, we'll make sure that we'll elect a good team to help you anyway. So that was it was. And when the chapter began then, there was a man called Fintan Sheeran. I can't remember now, was he a Sacred Heart? I can't remember what. But he was very good. We looked at heard all the reports from the regions, discussed all the various things. And then I suppose the issue of internationalization then was a major issue, probably the major issue in a way. And of course, he began to suss out again the pros and cons of that. And I think at one stage he had this straw vote, as he called it, like, maybe there was around 31 members. I can't remember now exactly at the chapter, but it was something like 15 for, 15 against, and one abstained, or one unsure, So it was like, but it said something about where we were. But I think the general agreement was then, no, this is something that we need to take seriously now. So they said, let us set up a discernment process then. And I think he helped us a lot in that by saying things like, he had some very clear statements, like one like saying, the man who is for internationalization should say yes. And that's a blessing for the society. The man who is against internationalization should say no. And that would be a blessing as well, because he said, what we want is to hear what's in the heart of each one, that there will be a real listening to where people are at. So it's not that we're playing one side against the other, or not playing politics. We're just trying to say, where is the Holy Spirit? I suppose it's something what like maybe Pope Francis has been at about the synod to these times, like that. Where is how is the Spirit leading you at this time, or in which direction? So he was saying that should be the model for the discernment process. And like you must have a few rounds of this, like before you'd be in any position to have a decision, like, So we began setting out, with his help, maybe with a few others as well, the sort of questions to ask people. But it was simple enough, like basically discuss what are the pros and cons of being an international society. So then it went on like that. Then we had a few rounds of that. And 1992, I suppose, or into 1993, then we were asked the question, if the society leadership was to make a decision now on all they've heard, would you be happy with that? But anyway, the position was anyway that the membership responded in this sort of, I suppose it was whatever you call it, sort of a census of the society. They said, yes, whatever the society membership or the society leadership decides now, we'll be okay in that position. So there was some, I suppose, who said no again, but that was all right too. So then we went forward into this regional, the meeting with the regionals in September 1993, and I thought that the regionals would have issues from their region, but no, they said no. We're more or less, this is our position. You've heard our position now. You've seen the numbers, whatever like that, and they're more or less saying we need a decision now, which was coming to us a bit quick. But Michael Brown, who was the facilitator, said no. Let the Superior General Council take a few days off to come and see if they're ready to make a decision. And the regionals went aside for a while. So after about 2 or 3 days, then we met, and I must say there was very little decision or very little division or anything like that. We discussed the thing thoroughly, but at the same time, I think there was good unity about it among ourselves. And then we came back to the region and said, this is our decision. We're going to say yes to the thing. And of course, it was very well received by the regionals. They were quite happy that a decision had been taken. They said they've been long enough left now hanging, so they want a decision. So then we sent out the word to the membership, and again, very good positive response, So after that, then I forget sort of the details of it now, but we began to move forward in terms of then, well, okay, what will it involve? It'll involve formation, it'll involve formators. We were, in some ways, I suppose I felt we were blessed with a fair few people who had done formation and studied formation a bit and so on like that. So at least we felt there'd be people to call on anyway. So bit by bit, like we're putting plans in place and looking at possibilities. But then it suddenly, the feeling, well, no, let's wait until the 1996 chapter before we take, the go forward. So that 96 chapter then didn't hardly spend much time at all in the sense saying, no, yes, go ahead. So we got the all clear then to go ahead with the planning then. So then the planning then was to get formation houses set up like somewhere, like so the initial formation, Ijibode and Imonyi, those two places first, I suppose. I can't remember now when Zambia and Lusaka came along, but those were the two at the beginning anyway. And then of course the work began straight away, I suppose, finding then the second phase of where would philosophy then, and the feeling was that we needed to bring all our students together, that it wouldn't be philosophy done in West Africa and more philosophy done in East Africa. We must be together. We must try and build a common society feeling among ourselves. So we did that. And that was the work then given to a small group of Sean Barry and Hugo McBride. I forget now who else. There was 3 or 4 of them anyway, to maybe Michael Long, to go and suss out different possibilities, for where would this philosophy phase be based, and I mean, they did look at the possibilities in, I think, well, a number of places, but I think that it was very clear that they recommended South Africa. They recommended then, of course, a good discussion with people at Sadara and said, this is the place for us. There's other international groups there at the time as well. So that was simply enough, I suppose, the way things went. And then, like, of course, Hugo, I mean, was very willing, very generous. Yes, he would be willing to take on the role. And, like, I suppose the building of the getting land, building the place, and so on like that. He did a lot of work there with that. And I know the early students, the first students that came. Of course, you were probably one of the first students as well, like to come to. You had to live in Esivadini. You might even know more about it than I do. That phase of it, anyway. And then. But then the whole thing of building the place worked out very well, and I think we're very happy with it. And I mean, and the students seem to be quite happy with working or living and attending Sadara and so on. So that, and then of course the next stage was theology, and on to Nairobi then, which Pat Sullivan, I suppose, was involved in that. Like, and we got the house set up and relationship with Tangazo set up and so on like that. So it was very exciting in a way. And I mean, the vocations people were doing good work, and it seemed to be getting good guys like to come in. Like, so I think we were moving along quite happy with the way things were going. I suppose there had been a lot of alerts put at the beginning. This will cost you so much and all of that, but somehow we seemed to be getting good response from benefactors as well. Like, so at least it was keeping us alive anyway, So and then of course it seemed to be all the more necessary because the students from Africa, that side of things had been nearly completely dead at that stage. At that stage, I think it was Damien Martel probably was the only European student, I think in the group at that stage. And anyway, it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I suppose that it went bit by bit. I mean, and when eventually the first ordinations came, yourselves, Joe, I mean, it was 2007, wasn't it? I mean, thereabouts, or whenever it was. I mean, you were ordained, and I mean, it was a lovely thing. And suddenly fellas are off, the new men are off to the missions. I mean, it was a great, amazing thing, all right. Like, and I think it has gone well. I mean, we were lucky to get people who had experience of formation. I mean, I suppose we weren't always perfect, I'm sure, in the thing. But anyway, the thing has mushroomed now. It has gone ahead. I mean, this year with the amazing number of, is it 11 or 12? I can't remember, of students now being ordained priests and so on. It's great. And it would be so tragic if we hadn't done that now, because there it is. I'm sure this year there must have been 15 or 16 priests of the older men have died already, like, and I mean, our society is still being reduced in numbers, and many are no longer able to work and so on. So it's great to have the young men coming. And I mean, it's just something lovely like to see anyway at the moment. And like, I think that has gone well. I think in general, like, the young fellas have done well. Like, I mean, when we think of the troubles we had, because I wasn't that long into my time as the Superior General, when we found the issues around sex abuse, child abuse, all of these things began to emerge as huge issues. Like, so, I mean, in fact, it was amazing the number of issues that there were around all of that. But so I suppose if some issues arise for the young men as well, it's not, I'm just saying it's not a disaster. Like, I mean, it's part of who we are as human beings, I suppose, like, but I think it has gone well, and it means that we are able. I'd missed out on something though that was, I think, helped the international program of it as well. That was around 1988 when Peter Finnegan and the guys were talking about a new mission, and they had eventually then agreed to go to that. There was a whole burst of new mission thinking, like, and there was South Africa, Cameroon, Zimbabwe, has opened up as well. And so there was a great sense of life of having new missions and so on, and people going and that. So I always thought that was necessary, that we'd have to have some sort of things to give us life. But it was amazing the interest was there once we started opening these new missions. There was a huge interest in what was happening in South Africa, happening in Zimbabwe, happening in Cameroon. But I suppose Cameroon went a bit off the map in the end. We never seemed to build up numbers there very much, like, But anyway, I think that it has been a real blessing, like, that we have been able to move ahead with the international program. And then just, I suppose, as well, and then the blessing, I suppose, continues, is that people like yourself, I mean, the young men have been so gifted, talented, and I think there's a lot of new possibilities opening up for the society now, like, you know. And I suppose we're today, I don't know where we are today, I suppose you could say we're in a world on the move. I'm just thinking when I went home to Ireland last year, I find people, well, I mean, it wasn't too long out of the car when I met a lady, an African lady, and I said, "Where are you from?" "I'm from Zimbabwe," she said. And I said, "I'm just home from South Africa." She said, "Where?" I said, "It's actually a place called Brakpan." "Oh," she said, "I know that place." She had been in Zimbabwe, or she had been in South Africa and heard of Brakpan anyway, at least anyway. So I said the world was changing. But then after a while, I was there a while, of course, I began to hear the mutterings of some of them against the Ukrainians. Why are we being flooded with Ukrainians? So I suppose there's that issue of refugees, migrants. I suppose it's a whole new world at the moment opening up, and I suppose there's pluses and minuses in it, like, you know. But I think it's an area where we'll have to, in some way, we'll have to get good at that, like, of trying to help people to settle in. Because at the moment, say here in Brakpan, people wouldn't like me to be too involved in helping migrants, you know, that sort of way. And yet, I mean, the migrants and the people from other countries are a major part of our church now, like, you know. At one stage, someone said to me, "Okay, you can help the migrants, all right. I mean, you can baptize a child, but don't do anything to help them get a job," like, you know, this sort of. So I suppose it's just it's a difficult issue, like, you know. And I mean, I'm sure the same thing would have been said in Ireland if I said the same about maybe that Zimbabwean lady. If she had a child, I'm sure they'd be saying, "Oh, I don't," you know. But that's the way it is, like. So, but I think our work has to be to build bridges between the migrants and the local people. And maybe one of our tasks as a missionary society is to be bridge builders. I think we have to help migrants, help the local people to accept one another. And maybe I think the sort of work you're doing yourself, Joe, I think is very important in that. I think the technology of new community, this, you know, modern communication, I think that's a major bridge builder, I think. And if we know how to use that, I think it could help people a lot, you know. So I suppose I can just say, well done on the work you're doing in that line anyway, you know. And, but I suppose that would be a big thing. But I suppose other issues that when I see religion disappearing though off the face of the earth in Ireland, a place like that, I'm just saying, what's going to save the church in a way, like, you know. And I remember one time I used to read Karl Rahner a fair bit. He used to have certain things around. Well, I'm sorry, I'm misquoting him in a way now, but he used to say something like, "The mystic will save the church," that we need still to have that contact with the Lord. We need to have people who can open up the avenues for us to help us to communicate and to find the Lord in this new world now. It's not the old world, but a new world. How do we relate to the Lord at this time? And I think maybe that's where, again, a missionary society, I think we have a lot of gifts, and I think we have a calling there to help people to find God. I think, you know, I think that is the sort of thing. And maybe God is more active than ever, but we don't recognize him at the moment, you know. And maybe that would be a major issue, I think, for us at the moment. And I think that maybe the Spirit of God is at work now with things like this synod at the moment in Rome and so on like that. But I think we as a society, though, we have to be adventurers. We have to be outgoing people, reaching out to new places, to different places. But there's going to be a lot of sacrifices involved in that too. It's going to really challenge us to be able to give of ourselves in uncertain, insecure situations. And there's a lot of violence, I suppose, against, and a lot of indifference towards the church as well now at the moment, like, you know. So it's going to be difficult times. But I'd like as well to think that, you know, our society can continue to expand its idea of being international, in the sense of maybe, well, of course, continuing to take in, or hopefully we'll take in some South Americans. I think we need to have them whether at some stage the society can also even reach, if you like, eastwards, to try and get some Eastern mentalities, or maybe some of the Koreans or Filipinos or Chinese or something, a part of our society too. I think that we have some need to be truly international in that sense, like to gather a lot of the different experiences together, you know. So I suppose that would be part of the things I'm thinking about. But of course, there's a huge amount of stuff as well, I mean, around today about the The climate change, I mean, that's a major issue, I think, which we somehow again have. I suppose we have to be working in our parishes and yet specialising. I think you're doing that yourself, Joe, a bit in the sense you're running a parish, you're involved in a parish, but still you're able to give time to your specific interests as well. And I think that maybe is a way forward for a lot of us as well. I think that will be the way we'll have to go, like, but I mean, in the challenges in the future, of course, you hear of the dangers of division between us, between maybe East Africa, West Africa, and so on. But I don't think, myself, I'm very hopeful. I don't think that will be an issue for us. I think there's a good work being done in formation. I think Bob Patrick plays a big part in it. I think I think Nairobi as well, the theology house there, builds a very good relationship, I think, between all of us. So I think there's good respect and good willingness to help one another, like, and that's what I look forward to going forward into the future anyway. And that's, of course, a big issue again. Here we had just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had 7 young people not ordained, but confirmed. And now, I suppose the concern you hear has been mentioned now, how long will those 7 young people stay with us in the church? And how do we speak to the young heart today? Like, how do we say a word of kindness, of mercy, of spiritual, I don't know, uplifting or upliftment or something that would give them new hope or new interest in the church, And I mean, the danger is that just as they're disappearing in Ireland, a time can come, even though I know the African mentality is very deeply religious, at the same time, there's another cultural world around as well, like that is also disconnecting people from the church and from that, I mean, I know, I hear, say, for example, in Brazil, that there's so many fleeing into these gospel churches and type of thing or other thing. I hope that the same wouldn't happen in Africa as well, like, that we would need to stay somehow solid. And I think missionary society has to be involved in those sort of issues. And
Father Kieran ends with a prayer for the society and its good work.
Well, I would just say that, first of all, that spirit of mission will continue, that it will be just reach new depths, and that it will be truly spreading good news, the good news of Jesus, like, and that we will each personally know the Lord in some new way, like some deeper way, like, and that out of that we will have really good news to spread to the world. I think that and that we will build up a deep connection between one another as well, and that we will enjoy the presence of one another, and that we will have the stories and the background of each one will be important to us, and that we will value each one like as friends, like, and that we will light a fire, I suppose, that will help the world, like, to see that, that there is Jesus and there is a Holy Spirit that the world needs to hear,
On behalf of SPMS Media, I thank Father Kieran Birmingham for giving us this interview. I was in the initial formation house in Nigeria back in 1997 when Father Kieran came visiting as the Superior General. I was expecting a very imposing and bossy figure, but Father Kieran appeared a very simple man and still is. We wish him the very best now and in the future. Joe.Archibong for SPMS Media.